Now, I'm not sure exactly why this stumped me, but it sort of did. For the front of this, now I'm got it on its back here. I put a slot there on the front side and a slot here. That fits like here, slides right into the slot there, and then keeps that slot open for the drawer in the front. And I just did a rough cut on the side, as I intend to sand those off at a later date, and probably just do probably put a little bevel on the grill itself so I can just drop a little bead of weld along that seam. Update on the leg. I made it sure that we're square with the front. It's still laying on its back. I popped a weld up underneath, sorry for the exposure, up underneath there, and again up underneath there. And then as you get in, I filled the holes in on either side as best I could. Well, I'm ending another evening. I was able to get the 4 legs on, as you can see. It certainly wasn't without trial and tribulation, but they did go on fairly well. Every time, and before I tacked everything, I made sure that it was square as could be. We'll continue with the railing across the bottom that'll support the LP tanks, but for now I think we're pretty much done. Those spots, as you can see going up the corners, worked really well. Once it was clamped in place, fill those in with weld, and it really did work quite well. So next step, before I put the shelf on the top, I was able to grind these corners flush with the tops, and then I put a bevel on the inside edge past this metal outside leg, and then filled it back in with weld and sanded it flat to tie this inside and the leg together. So done that. This doesn't have to be too fancy because the shelf is going over here, but I can't do it after the shelf is on. So I did that. I tied this in as well. I put a weld down the center, and I tied this other corner in as well. And then moving on over to this corner, got that one in, and then again here. Now there was a little gap in here from the leg where the side met the leg, so I filled that in with weld and sanded that all in, consistent with the contour of the grill. I patched a couple of slots that I had. The slot here that I had open for this to slide on was just a little large, so I just popped in a little weld there and put on a little spot of weld there as well. So just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. And I think the next thing that we'll do probably is put the feet on for the casters on the feet, and also put the shelf across the top, and that'll tie that all together. And that should be our next step, I believe. So I told you the next step in my process would be to put the top shelf on, which I positioned that in place from the top as it's standing now, and just put a couple of tacks up along here and clamped it as I went along, and put some tacks just in and under there. And I made the tacks much more complete on the hinge side where the doors are going to be. Much more complete. Don't be too critical of my welding. Actually, my welding kind of sucks. But anyway, I just tacked it up along there, and I'm sure that's going to be more than enough to keep that shelf on. The other thing I did was to put the feet on the ends of the legs for the casters. So I did that as well. The other thing I did note on the inside, and I haven't had a chance to clean these up, so once I got this all together, there was an open space on the back side of the leg. So I cut some tiny little postage size pieces of steel and welded those in place. Now again, I haven't had a chance to clean these up. I'll have to flatten those out a little bit so I can get that tray in there. But otherwise, I'm happy with the way it is so far. Since this shelf is on top, I got some 1/4-inch rod, round rod, obviously. And I think what I'm gonna do to support that shelf and to support the door and hinges, I'm gonna weld a 1/4-inch rod, just continual all the way across, to support that shelf and to support those doors and hinges attached there. So I'll just tack it along the way intermittently and then come back and kind of fill in the gaps. Now, one of the next things that I did fabricate is the kind of ladder section, or it's the support for the legs across the bottom, and also support for the LP tanks that'll be sitting right here in these 2 voids right here. Here, it will rest on here, and here on the other side. I figured it would be easier to have 2 tanks as opposed to 1. If you run out, you can always swap them back and forth. So this particular piece will fit between the legs. These will run then the length to the other between the legs here. And then I took, sorry for the fast movement there, I took these under cross pieces, and obviously I haven't welded these up yet, but I took a little 45 diagonal, came in about 1 inch, and slide those underneath at about an 8-inch between here. That will fit that ring that sits on the LP tank. We'll see how that fits. But anyway, I thought I'd show you this while the light is a little bit better, and we'll get that in place. So I cut all the components. As in my previous video, I showed you the pieces. I just brought them out to the garage now and cleaned them up, and then took the ones that I angled off and welded those shut. Are they the prettiest? No, not really. They'll work and they'll be just fine. 4 additional ones that weren't in my video, my previous one, but those will go between the circle of the bottom on the LP tank, and these will go, the LP tank will sit on these. These will essentially retain it from moving along this parallel. So anyway, we're getting started over here. I started with this particular cross piece, made sure it was square, equidistant on either side of the leg, and 1/2 inch in on either side of these 2-inch pieces, and tacked them in place. So we'll go from there and build that. There'll be, like I demonstrated earlier, the 2 parallels here, and then the cross pieces that'll come up here. So we'll continue. Now you may be tired of me talking about jigs, but I made a square out of that same piece of plywood that we used earlier for the frames. Cut that up and made 1 square big enough for these 2 parallels, and then underneath these will go here and up to that. It just keeps everything square that way. So that's what I'm up to now. We'll do this side and then we'll do the other side. The tank, obviously this is tipped totally upside down here, so you get some kind of perspective, but we'll do the same thing on the other side, and that will hold each respective tank. So I'm back at it today, and I wanted to put some door rests on the side of these sidewalls, and that will actually further reinforce their strength. But I just got a piece of wood, put a saw kerf on the bottom to the depth that I want to make or put the rod, and actually once that fire cord or fiberglass rope I got 1/4 inch is compressed, I lose about a 1/16. So I made the saw kerf at 3/16. I'll rest it on here, put the rod on the side up to there, and then tack it along the bobbin to hold it in place. So that's what I'll do on either side. And obviously the center, if you've been watching, is much thicker, or twice the thickness actually. So I'll have to just widen out my saw kerf so that fits on there a little better. So once I get these other sides on, I'll widen the saw kerf and then put the two, one on either side of the center here. So as you can see, I widened the kerf for the center. Was able to put that one on the right set off distance, and I am able, because of the way it's set up, just to turn it around and get the set off on the other side. So we'll get that welded in as well. So this evening I thought I'd make the barrier, or those slide-in shelves that will go underneath the grill. I measured it out, and I got about 17 3/4 in the depth of it, not including the bend in the front, and then by 22 and 22 and or 23 3/8. So I've cut both of those. Now this is a piece that I got at the steel yard, and it is just a drop, which you get it much cheaper that way. It was like 75 cents a pound, and anyway, it wasn't bad. And it's, I don't know, maybe about a 14 gauge or so. It doesn't have to be real heavy. But anyway, took a piece of file paper again, and this is that 17. This is that 17 3/4 line right here. This is where the bend will be. I allowed about 1 inch over, and then made a little pattern that'll be the handle to pull that out. So that's where I'm at. Well, here I am back, and I thought, since I don't have the doors bent or anything yet, I can get placement of a couple of these burners, and I thought I'd start with the flat top first, because I think that might be the easiest and kind of get me accustomed to what I need to do. But as I realized when I put these up, they're actually too deep. They'll be just fine, but this nozzle, or whatever you want to call it, has got to stick out of the grill itself. Not much, but just a little. So I measured everything, and it's gonna, I've got it marked here and for right here. And I made a little pattern out of masonite, which I can't find this moment, but it's from the edge here to here. It's about 6.5, and then again on this side 6.5 to center, and I haven't cut this one, but 2.5 to the center of this pattern is where 2.5 is where this center will be. So I laid my pattern on there. It looks kind of heart-shaped, but I think what I'll do when I insert these, sorry about the noise, is tip them up like so, and tip them in like this. Once this gets ground out, they will tip in and then lay flat and push through. So that's the plan. My pattern, oh, here's the pattern. Made that on a masonite. Now, I'm using an 1.25 inch drill, 3 1.25 inch, and what I did was make a paper piece of the 1¼ inch cutout, sat that over my pattern, and where the compass center is, that's where I stuck my punch and made a punch there on each of the 3 spaces where I need to put the drill. So now I'm just drilling this out with my hole saw and a little cutting oil and just taking my time. And it's working pretty well. Next would be to grind this to that line that's inscribed on there until the burner fits through. And obviously take that metal piece off the end because it is a slightly smaller without that metal piece on there that adjusts the air for the flow once you get gas in it. Now this may seem like a strange view to you, but this is the underside, and I'm trying to fit these burners for the flat top where exactly I want them, and height-wise I have to determine that as well. So I made a board and I put 4 screws in it to level the other pieces that cross underneath the burner. I've got that on both sides, and I've been adjusting that and measuring, and actually used a caliper between the screw and the bottom edge all the way around, and have that pretty much all the same, and then made some minor adjustments just because of some vacillations in the metal itself. And I think I'm getting pretty darn close. And when I do get close enough, I will mark those and then put some angle iron across that and to support those. So I can come all the way across here, but it's the same darn thing on the other side. So I've got the flat top on just to make sure there's no interference with the flat top itself. And it doesn't seem to be at this point. So we got our holes made in the front. Those fit through pretty well. I think I'm going to make some kind of a cover cap for those that unscrews. And otherwise, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Okay, here now is my setup. I'm going to use that 1-inch angle that I got to construct all my frames to have actually a stop built in for the burners on either side. So I've got a setback of 2¼ inches to that front edge of that angle. And I've got both these pieces of wood, the same ones that I had the screws in, I just turned them over. After I scribed a line to where the level was, I've got that sitting on the line minus the width of that angle. So that should be right about where I want it. So I'll weld that in place, and that should be the back end. The one thing I'm going to add in addition is both those burners have a pin on the back side that I'm able to access, and it'll index those burners to the right place. So once I get the burners back in place, do all my measuring again, I'll be able to stick a pin through there or bolt and weld that in place on either side for the burners to get those indexed into place. Now here I am with the other setup. I've got the back angle welded in. Don't look too closely at my welds, they're not the greatest, but they definitely will hold. And then I've got a standoff piece, about 4¼ standoff from the front edge, inside edge. And then I've got that same scribed line, which you probably can't see or barely see, to the top of that 1-inch square. And that again is on both sides here, the standoff and then the little piece it's sitting on. So we'll get that welded in place. So this now being complete, at least for placement, the 2 in the front, and then got the 1-inch square along the front, the 1-inch angle in the back, and then there's an indexing pin. And get this out of here. Indexing pin in the back. So I set this back far enough because you need a little bit of an angle to get this in. It goes in. and then the index pin fits right on there. So they're pretty stable. They're not moving with that indexing pin in there. So they're in pretty good shape. So that's it for the burners.